Hey, all right, all right. You're listening to the Dead Man's Tome podcast, a show broadcast live from a trailer park deep in the heart of Meth County, Texas. I'm your host, Mr. Deadman. With me is S.K. Barrett, a life coach that can unfuck your life if you'll let him. Tammy G's out tonight. That's okay. That happens.
It happens.
It does. She has to recover.
Miss you, Tammy.
We all know she's a demon. We established that. And it was Halloween. She has to recover, okay? She has to recover.
I feel like I'm in a version of Groundhog Day, only where it's always October and we're always doing a podcast.
I feel that way too. And it's almost over. No, but I love this, guys. Anyway, we have a guest tonight, Jonathan Raab. How's it going, man?
Pretty well. Thanks for having me on tonight. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's no problem. No problem. Oh, by the way, I should say this is important. Tonight's show is actually sponsored by a book by Tony Evans.
What the fuck?
How'd
that happen?
I don't know. Sour by Tony Evans. Tony Evans, Better You Believe, is amazing. Sour is even better. It's horror, it's witches, it's dread, all that. You can get it on Amazon, paperback and ebook, so check that out. Wow, a legit sponsor for once.
Tony is not right in the head, so it should be a really good book.
Yeah. All right. With that said, let's get this going. All right, Jonathan Raab, for those who don't know who you are you and what do you do?
Yes, I'm a writer. I live in Colorado. I primarily write horror. Been doing that for a few years. I've got a few novels out, The Hillbilly Moonshine Massacre, The Lesser Swamp Gods of Little Dixie. My most recent is called Camp Ghoul Mountain Part 6, the official novelization. I'm also an editor of a small micro press. We just put out a book called Behold the Undead of Dracula, which is stories by authors basically channeling Hammer horror and the Roger Corman, Vincent Price movies from the mid-century. So neo-Gothic horror, a lot of good fun stuff.
That's pretty cool. That is really damn cool. So,
I like those titles.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah, thank you.
So why horror?
Great question. The world is horrifying all of the time, whether we want to admit it or not. I think the short answer is horror helps us deal with sort of the anxieties of our lives. You know, the instinctual fear of the dark we all feel to turning on the news and seeing like the apocalyptic horrors happening around the globe. But the real reason I like horror and I write horror is because it's a lot of fun, right? Like when I was a little kid, I wasn't really allowed to watch horror movies. So whenever I could sneak a scary movie or I read a scary book like Goosebumps or Christopher Pike, something like that, I always felt like I was breaking the rules a little bit and sort of pulling back the veil on what reality is really.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So to me, horror has just always been a lot of fun.
Yeah, see, for me, it was finding the occasional Playboy at a neighbor's house.
Sure.
Horror. Same concept.
Yeah, you know, I think we're
breaking
close.
the rules, being defiant, trying not to get caught.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
well, it's a horror if you do get caught, you know. Well, then it's actually more like a Porky's. It's more like a comedy for me anyway. And all those experiences of getting caught, numerous. You know. But yeah, horror, man. That's one thing I like about that genre is you can test limits, right? That's one place where people should be able to express themselves and be able to push boundaries to pretty much get people to face what they don't want to look at, face the unknown, face their fears, right?
Yeah, you know, we're just coming out of the Halloween season, which is the best, most magical time of the year. And what I like about that is that's sort of like our cultural moment to come together and like stare death in the face, you know, and then laugh about it, right? That's really the only time of year, you know, where it's like socially acceptable to do something like that. You know, for me as a horror fan who writes it and reads it and watches it like year round, I sometimes take that for granted, but I think there's something extremely healthy and cathartic about people consuming horror.
Oh, totally. And I don't even judge, man, horror of all types. I mean, if you're into the extreme stuff, man, go at it. If you like the more mainstream, you don't maybe you don't like too much blood. You maybe like a more psychological, or maybe like a more gothic. That's fine too, man.
Yeah.
Whatever floats your boat. Now, what's your inspiration as far as your writing goes?
Yeah, so I mentioned, R.L. Stine, obviously Christopher Pike. I don't think you're going to be in your 30s as a horror fan without, pointing to those two guys as big inspirations. But, when I was younger, watching, sort of kids horror or kid-friendly horror, like movies like Gremlins or Ghostbusters, even E.T., which I maintain to this day is a horror movie because it scared the crap out of me back then and still freaks me out. Stuff like that, Return to Oz, The Dark Crystal. Kids' movies used to be a lot scarier back in the day.
Oh, they did?
At least I think so.
Wizard of Oz, for fuck's sakes.
Yeah, right? The Flying Monkeys. Yeah, for sure. 100%. Stuff in Star Wars used to scare me. So even though I'd be freaked out and I might have nightmares after seeing stuff like that, I always wanted to come back for more, And luckily I had some older cousins and they had cable and they'd record movies off of, HBO or whatever. And then all of a sudden I'm watching, horror movies at an age where I was probably a little bit too young, but it sort of traumatized me in the right ways.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, that sort of stuff, I think a trifecta of things, maybe your parenthood, your childhood and the way your parents raised you and all that, I think it toughens kids up. I think the lack of horror, I think when people don't have that exposure, I don't know, they get a little weak towards things,
I think so. Like, I let my kids watch stuff earlier than the official ratings and typical other parents, and they'd have their friends or cousins over and they'd throw on Gremlins or something and they'd be laughing their asses off at it while the other girls were just, huddling under blankets, wanting to watch something else. And my girls are just, what? This is funny.
Yeah, some tough girls, this guy.
I do.
Yeah.
I actually do.
And that's good. That's a good thing.
Seriously tough girls.
Okay. Now, Jonathan,
I can tell stories.
What was your first story?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Oh, I was asking, what was your first story, first published story?
First published story, I actually started out writing veteran advocacy essays before I returned to fiction. So I was doing like nonfiction stuff for a while.
Really?
I decided I wanted to consign myself to what one of my college professors referred to as the literary ghetto by writing genre fiction and horror in particular. The first published one I did was one called Between the Walls of Static, which was for a non-paying anthology, which if you're an aspiring writer, don't do that. Make sure someone gives you money for your story, even if it's a token payment of like $10. Seriously.
Yeah.
So I did that, but that sort of gave me the confidence. It's like, oh, someone thought this was good enough to put into a book. And then from there, I continued to write and submit stories for publication. And I started self-publishing anthologies and stuff that I started putting together as well. So I tried out being an editor as well. So I put out a book called Spooklights back in 2014, I think. It's out of print now. But then moved on to other books like High Strange Horror and Terror in 16 Bits. All the while putting my own fiction out there, getting my novels published, and submitting short stories. Probably the biggest market I've been published in was the Lovecraft e-zine. There's a short story called The Secret Goatman Spook Show from a couple years ago that you could read for free online. And that pretty much sums up kind of my style. There's one review for that magazine on Amazon, and it's a negative review because of my story. Yeah, the guy says something like, these are all great Lovecraftian stories except for, The Secret Goatman Spook Show. It's like a splatter film. I don't get it. I'm like, no, you do get it. It's like a splatter film. You got it.
Yeah.
That's
got it. It's not a trick.
I'd be like, well, what's Lovecraftian about that? I don't know. Maybe Cthulhu got into their brain and possessed them and caused them to do stuff. I mean, Lovecraft does more than just a Cthulhu and weird, bizarre creature things,
Yeah, it's not even really about the creatures for him. It's about reality bending, right? And people going in pursuit of forbidden knowledge. And that's what the story is really about, even though I've got, blood geysers and chainsaws in it.
Yeah. And I like that story. I read through it. It was pretty good. It kind of reminded me of, what was that movie called? The horror movie. I think we just talked, The Ring, where they watch a movie and they'll die.
Oh yeah,
but except
Right.
a lot more grotesque.
yeah. Oh yeah, the Ring is definitely an influence in that, and there's a lot of found footage aspects in that story as well. Because I'm a fan of that subgenre, warts and all. So that's definitely an influence for sure.
Yeah. The demon thing that was in there that was like mutilating the bodies. That was crazy, man. Crazy
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, they have a lot of high-powered marijuana in Colorado. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah. Any
Here
research?
too, man. I'm up in Seattle, so I know. We followed suit.
Was it just the marijuana? Anything else you had to do for research for that story?
No, I mean I'm only half kidding. You know, I kind of grew up in a very remote, rural, conservative area, and there wasn't a lot to do if you weren't an outdoors kid or good at sports. And I wasn't really an outdoors kid or very good at sports. I mean, I spent time outdoors. I mean, you had to, but so I found myself attracted to the library a lot and weird movies a lot, and just had an overactive imagination. You know, I was afraid of the dark, you know, well past when it was probably reasonable to. So, you know, this idea like,
when you're out in the country, there really are things out in the dark that can
coyotes and bears, and plus where I lived is a purported UFO hotspot, so that probably seeped into my subconscious as well. So
gotta watch out for them. Gotta watch out for the UFOs.
Where was that?
So I grew up about an hour south of Buffalo, and my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, friends' parents, friends of mine from high school, had all seen UFOs, and there was always stories about that sort of thing. Unfortunately, I've never seen one as much as I'd like to. Maybe that's the reason I haven't seen one, is because I actually want to see one.
They say that about ghosts too. I'm like, no, they should just come down here. Yeah, okay. A ghost should just appear. A UFO should just come down. Come on.
I'm looking on a map. You mean Buffalo Creek?
No, Buffalo, New York. About an hour
Buffalo,
south of
New
Buffalo,
York.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Colorado was later.
Yeah, I moved here a few years ago.
Okay.
No,
Buffalo, New York has UFO sightings?
The area where I was from, about an hour south, did, yeah. So there's like a nuclear reprocessing fuel containment area that's totally not contained. And there's also weird military contractors around, and there's an Air Force base up in Niagara Falls. So you put all that stuff together and a bunch of bored locals, and you get some UFO sightings.
Yeah, you get all sorts of stuff over there.
Not like you can watch the football
UFOs,
team.
mutants, X-Men. You get all sorts of stuff. I mean, with the radiation over there, Jesus Christ.
Mostly just cancer, no superpowers, unfortunately.
Damn it. Okay. Now you said you started off with
nobody's been able to transmute radiation into superpowers in real life.
And that's the problem, man. I got stuck with leukemia. Jesus. Okay. A no sob story for me. I did it to myself. Okay, but you said you started off with nonfiction, writing stuff for veterans?
Yeah. So I got a bunch of credits from like 2012, around that era. I was actually in the National Guard for a few years. I did 2 tours overseas, and I was writing advocacy pieces basically about the veteran experience, about trying to find a job basically during the post-recession period.
Oh shit!
Trying to bridge the civilian military divide, stuff like that. I did that for a couple of years, and those were like my first like pro publications. And I kind of saw my writing career going down that path, and I realized even though I ended up writing a novel about war, I didn't want to be stuck there. Like my real passion was always horror, in genre fiction, and I wanted to return to that. So I kind of shifted gears and said, okay, I'm going to take the things I learned writing nonfiction and, getting some editing experience and working with professional editors, and I'm going to sort of leverage that towards, writing about monsters.
Well, in a way, you were writing about monsters before. I mean, I take it you've seen some things in your tour.
I did one tour in Afghanistan, which was, a very long weekend for us weekend warriors. That's not what the commercial said we'd be doing. And then my second one was in Kuwait, which was we were basically just glorified mall cops. So there wasn't a whole lot going on there. I got in shape and drank a lot of energy drinks, but that was about it. But yeah, no, horror. I think what you're referring to is like horror can be, a great metaphor for real world things that people might not be open to talking about, right? So if you want to talk about the horror of war, people are probably not super comfortable, talking about that subject. But if you can sort of put that into a fictional story, and I've written, a couple stories that are set in Afghanistan or in the military that are fiction, it's a lot more palatable for folks.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? Especially if they're very politically minded and they don't want to hear it. Like, well, okay, well, I'm just going to cloak it in something else, and you'll probably still get the message.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, writers have been telling stories through metaphor since the first cave drawings.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Pretty much. Yeah. So yeah.
Now the question I have here is, how do you go from writing nonfiction, CNN, or I said CNN? Are they on CNN?
I had one op-ed on CNN, I think, for Veterans Day once.
Okay.
I had some CNN stuff, New York Times, a couple other places around.
Okay, that's where I got that from. Okay.
Yep.
So how do you go from that to writing about horror monsters?
So like I said, I had loved horror when I was a kid, and sought out horror movies as much as I could as I got older and got some disposable income, and discovered discountdvd.com and was ordering like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff with my busboy money. And I actually had been writing a little bit when I was a kid and through high school, and then got back into writing fiction when I was in college a little bit, but I never got published anywhere with the horror fiction. So as I entered my mid-20s, that's when I, starting mid to late 20s, I started getting my nonfiction published, and I looked back on the horror stuff that I'd been writing, and I realized, like, hey, I kind of want to go back to that. Now that I'm a better writer, I wonder if I can get published, get someone to, look at a novel or publish a short story. And lo and behold, with enough work, you can definitely get a little bit of recognition and get your stuff out there. So I don't really regret it, even though I sort of made the joke. It is kind of a literary ghetto, especially like if you're writing sort of very particular weird or horror fiction. There's definitely a market for it. It's just not a huge market. If I really wanted to make money, I'd be writing romance or erotic or something like that. I mean, seriously, I would be.
No, I totally get you. And there's been several guests on the show where maybe on the side under a pen name they might do that. I don't know.
Yeah, good for them. Yeah.
I take it you don't. You don't have to reveal your pen name.
I've got very limited time. I got very limited time. So if I can, get a short story out, every couple months, or a novel every other year or something, like that's about as far as I can go. Especially since I got a baby in the house these days. So.
Oh yeah, you don't have much time with that.
Oh man, no.
New father?
Yeah, my son is about 6 months old. Yep.
Yeah. Your time is spent, son.
That's tough.
I got two. You're on borrowed time, even for tonight. You probably have to ask for permission to do this.
Well, he goes to bed somewhat early, but it definitely took some coordination and communication for sure.
Yep, that's the future. It gets better though. It does get better. Oh man.
And then it gets worse again.
Yeah, it's cool.
And then it gets really better.
Right now,
and then it goes all to hell, and then it gets great.
I'm in the phase where they depend on me. They look up to me. They want to hang out with me. So they're not teenagers yet. They're little kids. They're little kids and want to play Minecraft with their dad. Okay, are they? Oh, okay. So yeah, literary ghetto. I mean, is it really that? I know you talked about that a little bit, but I mean that's funny, right? Hard, the literary ghetto.
Yeah, I think it's just because it doesn't. I mean, it's gotten better in recent years, but it doesn't get as much, sort of critical acknowledgement. Although I think that is changing a lot. But if you look at some of the top tier writers in the field, so a guy like Paul Tremblay I think he's a math teacher full time. John Langan, I think, is a professor. You've got Stephen Graham Jones here in Colorado, who's also a professor. Most of the top tier horror writers Not all of them are full time. A lot of them have, day jobs, to sort of help pay the bills, even though they're the ones, getting reviews or shout outs or articles in the Times, or, getting mentioned on NPR or stuff like that. So even some of the folks at the top of the game, commercially and critically, they're still sort of grinding with the day jobs,
I mean, it's hard. I mean, I'll be very honest here and very, very revealing. It is pretty hard to make a living off of horror. Not trying to be a Debbie Downer or spread some bad news, right? But I'm just speaking honestly, from my experience. Even it seems pretty hard. But there's people who do, but they, like you said, they supplement it with a full-time job or maybe a part-time job, or maybe they write other genres. Maybe they write nonfiction.
Yep.
What about for you? Like, is your writing and your work with Muzzlelandpress, is it helping to pay the bills? Has it become full time for you, or is it still like you have to?
If it could be, I think I probably would pursue it, but it would have to drastically increase in the amount of revenue it's generating currently, because you got to pay the authors.
Mm-hmm.
If you're putting together a book like an anthology, if I'm editing an anthology, you got to pay the authors, pay the artist, pay production costs, pay for shipping, not to mention the hundreds of hours you're putting into editing and putting the book together, promoting it, and all that. And then, traveling to, First Fridays to sell books, or art shows to sell books, or conventions to sell books. Those bills add up after a while. So I don't really make any money off of Muzzleland. Like, I'll usually have enough cash in the tank to pay the next round of authors, this month. You know what I mean? That type of thing. If I'm putting together a new anthology, or I can pay off the credit card debt that I use to travel to Necronomicon to sell some books. Like, that's about as good as it gets. So the small press, the micro press, that's much more a labor of love.
Yeah.
The writing, I make a little bit more money, because you can sell a short story anywhere from $25 to $150, something like that. And then the novels, I make a little bit of money. Get royalty payments, whether it's from the publisher or through the stuff that I sort of handle through the Amazon backend. But most of that money I end up just putting back into the press to pay my next round of authors or the artists for the next project.
Yeah, you got to.
So you do it because you love it, and you pretty much break even, and you're totally cool with that. I mean, not that you would turn down more money, I'm saying, but it's good enough to keep going. Yeah,
it is. It's, if you're like, not to use this term sort of loosely, but if you consider yourself a creative person or an artist, you're going to do it whether you get paid for it or not.
Yep.
That being said, the older I get and the more bills I have and the cost of living in Colorado and formula and diapers, it has changed my approach, because I do make more money writing, whether that's selling stories or novels or whatever. Like, that's kind of going to be my focus going forward, just because with limited time, limited resources, one's going to make me a little bit of money and the other probably won't make me as much, if anything. So going forward, I probably won't be doing any anthologies anytime soon.
Yeah, anthologies are a gamble. My experience, Devin Stone has published quite a few anthologies, and it's like the ones that really seem to do well, and by well I mean break even, maybe a little bit better. It's like Lovecraft. It's like if it's Lovecraft theme, it does well. If it's anything else, probably not. And I don't know, how much time do you spend with like messing around with keywords and like SEO stuff to like try to help get the book out there?
I've heard that, and I've heard from more successful sort of small press independent publishers. A lot of them will be like, hey, we'd love to do this super creative outside the box thing, but we need to put Cthulhu in the title because people are going to search for that and it'll sell. So that's why you see, all of those themed anthologies. To be honest, I rarely think about that marketing aspect when I'm coming up with these like Gonzo titles. Like, Terror in 16 Bits, which is the video game anthology I did, that is not optimized for any sort of search because it doesn't have the word horror in it. It doesn't have the word video games in it. Most people don't know what 16 bits means, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a hyphen in
Losers.
it. Yeah. Philistines, right? So, with this recent one, the newest one, which came out earlier this year, Behold the Undead of Dracula, lurid tales of cinematic gothic horror. I front-loaded that. I was like, okay, someone's going to search for Dracula, right?
Right.
Someone's going to search for horror or maybe gothic horror, right? And then put in the keywords like vampires and that sort of thing. So we'll see how this one sells.
Yeah, man, you can end up spending a lot of time tweaking things on the back end. Maybe this will help. Maybe this will help just a little bit, but it just becomes maddening. And something like Terror in 16 Bits, that's how I didn't realize this, but that's how I stumbled across Muzzlelandpress. So I knew about you guys for, I guess, about a year or so. But it just didn't click until I was like, wait, let me talk to this guy. I didn't get him on the show. Because I think that'd be a cool guy to talk to. I like his stuff. I like what Muzzleland is doing. And I read your short story. I was like, hell yeah, man, that's a good fit. Good fit.
That's great graphic for that story too.
Yeah. I was saying in the
for Terror in 16 Bits or for
Secret.
So that's by an artist named Peter Lazarski. He's also like an indie video game developer. He's done art for a couple of my novels and a couple of the anthologies. He just does absolutely great work. You can find him on Twitter. He made a game called Halloween Forever, which if you guys like, and I know you like the old school sort of 8-bit style platformers, it's essentially like a Nintendo game, but it's totally like Halloween themed.
Is it on Steam?
Yeah, it's like it's like dirt cheap. You can find it on Steam. I think it's like $5 or something like that. Definitely worth your time if you like that art.
Yeah, I'll probably buy it tonight then. We'll play it this weekend. If I do stream this weekend. Not saying I will. I don't know. I gotta see what happens. I've been streaming every day in October. So imagine.
Well, it's Halloween forever, right? Halloween's never over. So yeah, it's $4.99 on Steam.
Feels like it.
I was saying in the green room and the pre-show stuff, which is available for patrons, by the way, that this looks like a Splatterhouse. Is that what you're going for?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, so Splatterhouse 2 is like one of my favorite games. I like the third one and the first one as well, but the second one's the best. So I basically told him, I was like, hey, I want to do something that's like Splatterhouse 2, just don't violate the copyright. And that's pretty much what he delivered.
Yeah, that's good. Does it mask, chainsaw, overalls? You got it. Ah, man.
All the jagged graphics, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So I think you probably said this, but maybe I missed. So what led to the birth of Muzzlelandpress? Like, why Muzzleland? Yeah.
So I moved to Denver, I think in like 2013 and 2014, something. I think it was 2013. And I was underemployed, and I was kind of noticing that there was independent horror. There seemed to be sort of this uptick in like small press stuff going on, and sort of the democratization of publishing tools, self-publishing tools. They had gotten to a point, especially with Amazon stuff, that CreateSpace and Kindle, that you could put together a pretty decent looking book, and it didn't cost a ton of money. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was pretty user friendly. So there had been other stuff out there before, but it was sort of getting to a point around that time where it really enabled a lot of people, all over the country and the world, especially in like indie genre fiction, to sort of take the tools into their own hands and start publishing themselves. So I had been talking with a friend of mine, my friend Colin, about doing an anthology, for a while, and then I said, hey man, I'm just going to do this. So I got him to sort of co-edit the first book, Spook Lights, with me, and put out a call for submissions. I paid people in contributor copies, which, by the way, if you're in that book, I owe you like $15. Just catch me at the next convention. And we put the book together.
So they got to chase you down for the money?
Yeah, well, I've lost contact with a few of them.
Oh. You got to
What
stay in
about my
contact.
money?
SK.
No, I'm actually still friends with a few of those folks. But so we put that book together and had a lot of fun, and immediately started on the next one, high strange horror, because as I mentioned, I'm obsessed with like cryptids and UFOs and sort of American folklore and mythology. So we put together an anthology that's themed around that. Really inspired by like John Keel and Charles Fort, Brad and Sherry Steiger, Coast to Coast AM type stuff. And put that book out, and that one did a little bit better. And I moved in to start publishing some single author works, and a couple novels and novellas and stuff, and just kind of kept it going from there. It just became something I was always working on, in the background. I'd go to my job, go to work, try to maintain a social life as best I could, and then sort of work on the next anthology or the next book. And it's just sort of something I've continued on since then, and kind of culminated with Behold the Undead of Dracula, which came out earlier this year, which is probably the best book I've put together, in terms of the strength of the writing in there and the quality of the book.
Well, it looks great. That cover, Behold the Undead of Dracula. Man.
That's by a guy named Trevor Henderson. I think his Twitter handle is Slimy Swamp Ghost. He does people send him photographs, and then he inserts like found footage monsters into them that look like kind of real, kind of spooky type of stuff. If you haven't checked him out, definitely follow him on social media, because he does great work.
Interesting. We could do some work together, maybe. I don't know. So tell us about Behold the Undead of Dracula.
Yeah, so I was kind of late to the Gothic revival party, and what I'm talking about when I say that, if your listeners aren't sure, you had the Universal horror movies, right, in the 30s and 40s, right, type of situation.
Right.
It wasn't until like the late 50s, getting into the 60s, and through the early to mid 70s that Gothic horror really took off again. And that really started with Hammer horror, right? The Hammer Studios out of the UK, where they essentially were making new adaptations of Dracula and Frankenstein. And eventually they got the rights from Universal to remake things like The Mummy and use the Wolfman and Curse of the Werewolf and stuff like that. So basically they were making like updated, 20, 30 years later, Gothic horror movies. So because it was a little bit later, and because of them trying to compete and make money, their movies tended to be a little bit bloodier. So you've got this like really bright orange, red Technicolor blood that really popped off the screen.
Yeah,
you've got guys like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, and then you've got this parade of like buxom, beautiful women, centerfold women, playing the damsels in distress or the vampire ladies. So these were films that were a lot more exciting, a lot more fast paced, a lot sexier, and they just made a ton of money and were super popular for a while. And they really inspired everyone from like, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola when he made his version of Dracula, George Lucas obviously putting Christopher Lee in the Star Wars movies. Like these films really inspired so much of what we come to understand about what these monsters are, and a whole new generation of filmmakers. And I discovered, kind of rediscovered on my own, the Hammer horror films a few years ago. And since watching The Horror of Dracula, I've just become obsessed with them. They're starting to become more widely available in Blu-ray releases. But for a while it was kind of fun, because it's like, all right, here's a AM or Turner Classic Movie release, which with a couple of them on. Here's a bootleg DVD that's got a film on it. Here's a 4-pack from Europe that I can watch on my PS4. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was sort of like rediscovering this lost, like forbidden treasure trove of Gothic horror movies that not a lot of people, it seemed like my age, knew about. So I became obsessed with those, and of course I also love like the Roger Corman, Vincent Price post-cycle stuff. So it just seemed like a natural fit. As I'm talking about these movies with other writers on Facebook or Twitter, other people were, really had fond memories of these films too. I said, well, why don't we just do an anthology where, hey, if you could write a Hammer horror movie, what would it be? And that's pretty much the challenge I gave to the authors.
Fuck.
And they all delivered in a really, really interesting ways.
That's a good anthology. That is a great submission call too. That right there. If you could write your own, Hammer horror film, what would it be? Oh God, yeah, that should sell. It should sell pretty well.
I hope so. Speaking of keywords, I have to say Hammer inspired, because nowhere on the book does it say Hammer horror. Just to be clear for any lawyers listening.
Oh yeah. Well,
could be any hammer.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Could be a framing hammer.
Yeah.
Right.
That's all it is. Framing hammer.
Roofing hammer.
Maybe. Yeah.
Ball peen. Yep. For sure.
Yep. Okay. So, I want to ask you. So, okay, with your experience publishing and all that, have you had any issues with Amazon either blocking or banning any of your books?
It's funny you should mention that. I have never, up until recently, up until this book, had issue with Amazon. I think it's mostly because I've seen this with like more erotic tinge stuff. Mm-hmm. They tend to be a lot more puritanical. My stuff typically isn't like that. I decided to get away from Big A. I went through Ingram to publish this book. And I tried to do a Kindle version through Amazon. And despite using the exact same settings, for the last 6 books I've done through Kindle, they just kept rejecting the manuscript over and over again. And I got in a sort of like technical support sort of development loop where I would describe the problem. They would tell me to do something. I would do it. I would get the same problem. And then they would have me wait for 2 weeks and then tell me to do the same thing again. So I don't want to call shenanigans quite, but I'm wondering if the fact that I published this elsewhere, that they're not being as cooperative in trying to get a Kindle version up. But I did just get the confirmation email today that if you have an e-reader, it's available on a whole mess of places.
That's good.
Currently.
That's good.
Yeah.
And from my experience, not through Ingram, but through I think I use my backdoor channel was Lulu, because they offer distribution on the Amazon on other places as well. And I had a book called No Safe Word. It was a horror erotica, and it was banned for. I know exactly why they blocked it, so I'm not really upset about it, but it's up there now. I published it through a third party, right, in the same paperback that they rejected because of certain words, I guess certain phrases. It's on there. It's like, you motherfuckers are so. I swear, man.
Yeah, you could totally try going through Drafted Digital to get to Amazon.
Yeah, that's what I use for my backdoor when I'm not doing Kindle. And I actually went through them, and I just followed the link. It is on Amazon now. Must be today, actually. It looks like published. So it is on Kindle. Yep.
Now, Ingram.
So you have to do a little side door action on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit more complicated, but it's up there. So.
And hopefully, with Behold of the Undead of Dracula, it should be worth it. Certain titles I have this difficulty with. I'm like, this title's not going to sell too well. So is it even worth the fucking hassle, man?
Yeah.
But wait, Ingram doesn't Ingram have distribution options too? Or
for ebook?
Yeah, like will they be? Are they also a backdoor way into Amazon and all that?
Yeah, to be honest, I typically just use Drafted Digital for my ebook, so I only use them for paperback this go around. So I can't speak to that.
I think they do offer an Amazon channel.
Yeah. There's so many different ways, and that's one thing. On a later stream, I want to do. I want to gather several people. Actually, ideally, I want to gather several people who've had a hard time being rejected on Amazon and talk about the other avenues writers can go through, because it's not just Amazon. People just say, "Oh, it's Amazon." I know they're like the big player. They're like the big conglomerate, right? They're not going down anytime soon. So it's like, but there are other options.
Yeah. This is my first time using Ingram. I will say it's a little bit more expensive because you do have to pay each time you update the interior or the exterior. So it can get kind of pricey when you're ordering proofs. But that aside, if you're willing to throw up a few extra bucks for it, I actually found the process to be a lot easier this go round.
Well, and you have to have your own ISBN numbers.
Yep. Which I would recommend you do that. Well. Yeah, I would recommend you do that for Amazon too, because otherwise it says it's like published by CreateSpace or I guess KDP now, published by Amazon, and like
independent or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always better just to have it there, because if a library is looking at your book or a bookstore, like that's a big red flag, and a lot of folks like, oh, this is not, that type of thing. So I'd recommend you have those anyway.
That's good. That's good to have. What was I going to ask? Something about gatekeeping. Okay, how do you feel? Actually, first, what is the importance about indie press? Like, you feel that there's a huge importance about to have independent press, such as Muzzleland.
Yeah, and I'll go a step further and I'll say that self-publishing, which is often demonized and often rightly demonized, but like, yeah, indie presses, like 2 of my favorite horror books of the past, 20 years were published. One was by an indie press out of and it's called The Little Dixie Horror Show by Mur Winery. And then you got a self-published book, Gateways to Abomination by Matthew M. Bartlett. And I read both those books pretty close to each other a few years ago as I was getting into indie horror. And these are books that, you're not going to find on a Barnes & Noble shelf. They were essentially, small press or self-published. They were so raw and their voices were so unique. There's probably no way that those 2 authors would have found an agent, gone through that whole process, gotten their books put out somewhere where I would have found it. You know what I mean? The only reason I found it is because I was sort of looking around Reddit. I was getting plugged into the indie scene. I knew the editor of the press for Mur Winery's book, sort of word of mouth stuff, meeting people, going to conventions, finding this stuff. There's an excitement there because the voices you can find there are wholly unique. And since reading those 2 books, these sort of unpolished, raw, like diamonds in the rough that, feels like they're forbidden objects I found in a horror movie, like legendary books, that, were lost to time. Those 2 guys are like 2 of my favorite horror writers today. And I absolutely, I don't think those books would exist. And I don't think I would have found those authors and read their work and become fans of them if they didn't step out on their own and, didn't say, I'm just going to go ahead and put this out there and see if I can find the audience. And since then, Mur's gone on to publish a number of books. He's building his audience, and Matt Bartlett has, basically this is like his part-time job is writing. He is super successful. He's very prolific, and he's constantly putting out work. And those are 2 success stories that just wouldn't exist if those guys didn't have that DIY indie spirit and just set out there to put it out there. They didn't wait for someone to give them permission, and I'm glad they didn't.
And these guys, did they go through an indie press, or did they just publish it themselves?
Yeah, so Little Dixie Horror Show is from Literati Press, which I ended up working with Charles from Literati Press for my first novel, Hillbilly Moonshine Massacre. So he did work with essentially a local publisher in Oklahoma. Okay. And then Matt Bartlett's Gateways to Abomination, he just self-published that. He had an artist friend help him out with the art, put the book together, and he just put that on Amazon. Since then, he hasn't done a whole lot of self-publishing. He's been working with other presses, including me, Muzzlelandpress. I put out a couple of his stories, and I put out his second collection and stuff. So since then, those guys have found a lot of success just because they took that step and say, whether they're working with somebody they knew locally or whatever, like, let's go ahead and put a book out and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
The only people, it seems, who like gatekeepers are the people who are inside the gate. In other words, if you've made it, if you're with a traditional publisher and you're making some money, then you think they're great. Nobody else does.
Yeah, the gatekeepers. It's like, So I could see a reason to have gatekeepers for, let's say, quality, right? But then quality is like
not really. Not really. Does that really work? Doesn't work for news.
Right.
They have all these editors, and their writing is shit.
Oh yeah. And I can think of a few books, mainstream books that well, they gone through. Well, actually, they were self-published first, and then they gone through a traditional publisher because they were picked up, but they weren't. It's not like it was fixed up or anything. The prose was still horrible.
Yeah.
Quality. That's. How do you feel about that, Jonathan?
I don't personally, have anything against folks who go through an agent. I know folks who have an agent and, have gotten bigger contracts with bigger companies. And that means if that works for them, because, that means they get paid to go places, right? They get to be, they get to travel and promote the book on the company dime. They get the promotion, they get the ads or the reviews in Publishers Weekly. That's great. And that's wonderful that works for them. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't working towards something like that myself. That being said, like, I don't see that as the only way, right? Like, yeah. I think young hungry artists, or even middle-aged hungry artists, right? You don't got to be that young. Like, if you want to put something out there, I would of course caution you to make sure that it's well put together. It's edited. It's got a professional look to the book. But I would encourage people to try to go find their audience instead of waiting for someone to bring their audience to them. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Now that's different than just putting your book out on Kindle and say, I published my novel. Look at me. I'm a real writer now. Like, that's a little bit different, right? Because it involves the work beyond just writing, and it also involves making sure you've got a quality product to deliver to folks.
Mm-hmm. And quality. I mean, one way you're going to know that's quality. I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes it's like the best feedback can be from the readers, right? The people that you're wanting, obviously, to enjoy your book. Now, of course, you get the occasional troll or someone, maybe not a troll, but someone who it's just not for them, right? So they'll give you all sorts of critiques, but it's like, they'll may say something like, oh, but I also don't like horror. But it's like, okay, well then, all right. But for the most part, the critiques from the readers, that helps out.
Well, especially if you have readers whose judgment you trust specifically. Mm-hmm. Those feedback from those people is crucial. And I don't mean, you don't want somebody who's just going to say, yeah, that's fantastic no matter what you throw out there. You want somebody who doesn't mind giving you shit when your stuff is shit,
mm-hmm. And I actually know a few people, quite a few actually, that are totally for gatekeepers of quality. And when they say quality, they mean like the prose. Like, the prose has to be the way that you read like a certain blog on how to write, how to keep your prose, and other like a Writer's Digest book or whatever, with Grammar Girls, things like that. Keep the prose 100%. Okay, that's good. Yeah, watch your grammar. Yeah, but then you have like literary greats like James Joyce, a run-on sentence of 3,687 words.
Jesus, yeah.
Ernest Hemingway, the guy known for short prose, he even had like a run-on sentence of 424 words. So I mean, it happens. I don't know. It's like, with quality, it's like, all right. As long as the grammar's good, it reads well, it's a good story. I mean, but what do you look for, Jonathan?
I mean, it's got to be, it's got to sort of have that minimum professional quality. If I'm going to buy a book, pick up and buy a book, if I see your margins are all over the place and this looks like you it looks like you typed this up in a Word document and didn't bother to, fix it and everything's in Comic Sans or whatever. Like, I don't care how
What's
good
wrong with Comic Sans? Come on.
I've actually heard that it's good to draft in that, but I don't know. That seems like a dirty rule. I think I have seen some books from people who went out there and just did it. And like, I'm going to get my book out there, and you can tell that's what they did. It's so hard to get the aesthetics down of what a book should look like. And I'm learning all the time, and people send me nasty grams about how I screwed up this, that, or the other thing. So I'm still learning, and I've been doing this for a few years. But I think the really important thing is the writing, and does it resonate with me in a way that's sort of meaningful? And that's harder than it sounds, because as much as I want to be like, yeah, go ahead, get your stuff out there and DIY spirit, and I'm all for that punk rock attitude. But if you're not a very good writer because you haven't been doing it very long, and like you said, you haven't been getting that good, solid, trusted, including negative feedback over and over and over again, I'm just not going to be interested in it, and I'm not going to get very far if I do pick it up. I wrote, I think, 4 or 5 full-length books before I published a short story or a piece of nonfiction. Like, that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of words. And that doesn't include the short stories I've been writing off and on, right? So, and I'm still getting better. I'll pick up something I wrote 3 years ago, and I'm like, ooh, you know what I mean? Like, ooh, I can't believe this got through, right? Yeah. So I think the most important thing is to be a craftsman when it comes to your writing, and don't get overly excited because you wrote your first book or you wrote your first story and you're ready to get it out there. Like, cool off. How long you been doing this? Is this really worth putting your name on out there right now? And I want you to think about that. And maybe it is, and maybe you should take that risk. But, like you guys said, get some eyes on it, get some trusted eyes on it, get someone who's a veteran in the game and have them read it, have them give you some real feedback, and be prepared to cry a little bit, because everyone needs to get slapped across the knuckles. Everyone needs to get better. Everyone needs to get good. And that just takes time. It takes a lot of time.
It does.
And like I like to say, if you can't stand to be wrong, you'll never be good.
Right?
Yeah.
Which means what I mean by that is you got to push yourself beyond what you're comfortable, and then allow somebody to show you where you need to get better. And that kind of wrong. If you can't, you got to make the mistakes and learn from them, and let somebody show you where the mistakes are so you can improve. And if you can't do that, then you're just going to be terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a writer, he gives out really good advice, really harsh advice on Twitter often. It's Nick Mamatas. And one of the things he said recently or a couple months ago, he was talking about, you can send your book off and pay someone $150 to edit your story or your book or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like an editor cannot fix a bad story.
Yeah.
An editor can correct your grammar and make sure your words are spelled correctly and give you some general advice. But if the story's bad, they can't fix it. And I'm afraid a lot of people are like, oh, well, I hired an editor for my book. It's like, that doesn't mean the book's any good.
That's true.
Right.
There's a lot of truth to that right there. Which, by the way,
plus, how do you know your editor's any good?
Right. I can think of
a good point.
I can think of a few editing services we even talked about on the show. We're like, I think this is like a little too much. Who is it? Who is this person? Like if it's an editor,
I have a fantastic editor.
That's good.
Ray Green, fantastic editor. I gotta plug her when I can.
We definitely got to talk about, what is this book? Camp Ghoul Mountain Part 6. What's going on with this?
6, yes. Yeah, so
Roman numerals. Sorry.
This is the official novelization of an 80s slasher movie sequel that doesn't actually exist.
But it should.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
It looks hilarious.
If that what I just said appeals to you, you're going to love the book. If that doesn't make any sense or that sounds awful, like, this is not the book for you. I'll just tell you straight up. So, I talked about
just the idea of having a sequel to something that has nothing before it, it cracks me up.
Yes. Yeah. So I love slasher movies, and for a lot of folks, we talked about like Universal and Hammer.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of older folks, like, when you think of horror, they think of Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, right? That type of thing. But for me, being a kid growing up in the 90s, like, my pantheon was Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason. Like everybody knew who those guys were, even if you didn't see the movies, right?
Right.
And then I think I was a teenager moving into high school-ish, like when the Scream movies were coming out. So, I got to be a part of that. Like, I was coming of age during the slasher revival.
Mm-hmm.
So slasher movies have always been horror for me, and people like crap on slasher movies and don't like them. And I totally get why there's a lot of legitimate reasons not to like slasher movies.
Well, there's opinions, but yeah.
Opinions, legitimate opinions, but I love slasher movies, even a lot of the bad ones. So I was watching, I think, Friday the 13th Part 5, I think, and I was like, I should write a slasher. And I was thinking about that. I said, okay, because Scream sort of put the slasher movie, it simultaneously resurrected it and sort of put it back in the grave, because what else are you going to do with the slasher movie after Scream, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking about Scream, and I was like, okay, I don't really want to do the totally self-aware meta horror stuff. I don't want to do just a straight slasher. What's an angle I can take to write a slasher but also make it unique? And I said, well, why don't I write one of those novelizations of horror movies that they used to do all the time back in the 80s and 90s? Like, if you couldn't see the movie, maybe you could get the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. I set out to write a novel that's based on this slasher sequel from a franchise that doesn't exist. So you get the story of Part 6, and I give you the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I'm talking about, I've got footnotes in there about what the cinematographer was doing, or about the score, or the gore effects, how they achieve the special gags and that type of thing. And then I also added in a backstory. I said, okay, if this is Part 6, that's when a lot of Part 4 or 5 is usually when the series starts to go off the rails, right? So what's going on in Hollywood making Part 6? What's going through the director's mind? Who is the director? What is he trying to say? And I come up with a backstory for this director who considers himself this auteur, and he's using horror to tell people grim, dire warnings about the secret masters behind America in his cheap slasher movie. So what starts as a man in a goat mask, mountain goat mask, chopping up people with an axe or a chainsaw, you end up getting UFOs and alien abductions and a secret cabal behind global power and cults, and me writing the book and the company or people maybe working for the government harassing me about writing the book. And it sort of spirals out of into high strange sort of Gonzo horror territory from there.
I'm on board. I'm on board with all this. And that might be a little strange.
Yeah.
I might need meds. No, this is great.
That's a separate discussion.
Yeah. We'll have that stream later. Does Mr. Deadman need medication?
Stronger medication. New medication.
Right. So you actually write the behind the scenes and all the extra stuff. I gotta get this book. I gotta order it tonight. At this point, any I don't want you to give it away, but any teasers, anything you want to tease real fast about it?
Could you repeat that? You cut out.
Oh, anything you want to tease us with about this book?
So I'll put it this way: if you like the slasher movies from the 1980s, the long-running Friday the 13th stuff, Sleepaway Camp, Nightmare on Elm Street. If you like that stuff, plus early 90s UFO, anti-government paranoia, drug war stuff, plus sort of John Keel, Hunter S. Thompson, reporter becomes the reported high strangeness. If all that stuff with a magic mushroom chaser sounds like something you might be interested in, this is the book for you.
Can I read it while on shrooms? Can I read while on shrooms? I don't know
if you could. Not successfully, probably. I will say magic mushrooms plays a very decisive role in this book.
Okay. That's a future live stream. Not I'll just put it that way. I might have to start with a Dr. Seuss book on that one. I don't know. See what I can do. Anyway, good question from the chat. What was the first slasher movie you've seen as a kid?
That's a tough one. I'm trying to think. It was probably a clip from A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. And I think it was the scene where I think the guy who's mute, he doesn't speak, the sexy nurse like lures him into a side room, and then they start making out, and then she like pulls his tongue like halfway out of his head, and then it turns out he's making out with Freddy or something. It's like really, there's some weird Freudian stuff going on here. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure it's subtext. I think it's overtext. But like, and then the bed like drops out and like sucks him down to hell. I think that was probably the first scene I can recall from a slasher movie. I think probably the first one I saw all the way through was probably Scream, to be honest with you.
It's not too bad.
What about for you, SK? What was your first slasher?
With? Slasher movie. Man, I don't remember there. It probably wasn't until the 80s, really. I'm trying to think. Because there was... I mean, does The Exorcist count?
No.
Jaws is a slasher movie.
I think you could argue Jaws if you want to be a,
Jaws is doing the killing. He's doing the slashing. He's eating.
And he's slashing good.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think Jaws would fit it. Porn or horror? Okay, Tammy.
I mean, I consider the Terminator a slasher movie, so like,
it has the same formula. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
well, actually, yeah, or Alien.
Alien would be one. Oh, and I was watching The Predator, like the second half of it, when you have those macho guys getting killed, taken out one by one by the monster.
Very bloody too.
Yeah.
Very creative kills and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now they were the final girls in that one. Well, only one was really. Yeah, good question, guys. Good question. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask. Let's see. You recently revisited Castlevania, right?
Oh, yes.
What was that like?
So I play those games sort of off and on over the years, dipping in and out of the series. And Konami, as we talked in the pre-show in the green room, I believe they're under the control of the Yakuza. So they are not making quality new games, but they did release the anniversary collection for like PS4 and Switch and all that, and Xbox. And I bought that, and it's got all the old school Castlevania games on it from Nintendo. One of them's from Super Nintendo, and then the Sega Genesis Bloodlines game. So with the Halloween season upon us, I usually end up playing a spooky game like a Splatterhouse or a Castlevania. So I played through the original Castlevania, which is probably like one of the most tightly designed, beautiful original NES games, and really just had a blast with it. I was talking about Hammer horror earlier. Like, if you're at all interested in video games, like the Castlevania games are basically Hammer horror, the video game, because you're fighting like the Gorgon, you're fighting Frankenstein's monster, you're fighting Dracula, bats and all sorts of spooky castles and stuff. Great atmosphere, skeletons. So it's just a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, man, those games are great. I think the first one I played was Castlevania 3. That was the first time. It's like one of those games where like the first time you see it, it's something. It's something important. Just experience alone. Now,
well, Castlevania 3 was the first one I played as well. My cousin had it, and that was really one of my primary media pieces of horror media pieces when I was a kid, because it starts out with the film strips going up, that orchestral score kicks in. It's got the spooky castle. It's got the text crawl. When you start the game, it's very cinematic. You got the lone figure in the robe, and the lightning crashes, and he throws the cape back as the music kicks in. And then you're fighting monsters. Just absolutely kick ass. Like I think I saw, Dracula and the Mummy and that type of thing in video game form probably before I actually saw them in film form. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Same here. It was, and you're right. They started off like it was a film.
Yeah,
man, I love that. It's like they actually had respect for the, for the genre that they were trying to, not really emulate, but just take influence from.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I know SK hasn't played it, but it's dude, like you're fighting like skeletons, like Jonathan said, zombies. You have Gorgon. You got Frankenstein's a monster. It is like an 8-bit horror game. It's just like a horror tour. It's pretty cool. In fact, even the first one, I think when you beat it, it plays homage to Dracula. You know.
Yeah, it lists the credits, and they're all like misspellings of like Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and stuff like that. So they're like basically acknowledging that they're poking fun of or like you said, paying tribute to the Hammer stuff.
Mm-hmm. Now,
the Universal stuff.
Did it hold up? In your opinion, does the old stuff hold up?
So I'm a 34-year-old boomer gamer at this point, so I say it does. I'm not sure someone who's half my age would think so. I do think the newer ones like Super Castlevania 4, Castlevania Bloodlines, and Rondo of Blood, like those ones at the old school, those probably hold up a little bit better because the graphics are a lot better, the controls are better, and the challenge is a little bit more forgiving.
Oh well, compared to Castlevania 3, okay, Castlevania 3. Yeah. Oh, actually, well, because you mentioned Rondo of Blood. Rondo of Blood is pretty freaking hard.
It is, yeah. I guess I played it on the PSP. There's like a save version, save file and stuff like that. So yeah.
The Castlevania 3 was pretty notoriously difficult. Did you ever play Castlevania?
There's a question in the chat, Jesse.
Oh, let me take a look. What's the question? Oh, what did Jonathan think about the animated series?
The reanimated series.
The Castlevania Netflix show?
Yeah.
I like it. It's a little, as the young people would say, extra at times. Like people drop. I think they say fuck a couple times, and like there's a lot of swearing and stuff, and it feels like it's a little edgy for the sake of being edgy. That being said, when you've got Simon Belmont and Sypha and Alucard fighting monsters from the video game, and you've got Dracula being this weirdo, brooding like warlord, and there's a lot of little Easter eggs and touches, from the settings to the characters. It's very clear that the producers of the show and the writers of the show really appreciate the games. And I really like the action. I'm not much for like an anime guy or anything like that, but the style I think works for me for the most part. I really like it, and I can't wait to see season 3. So I think there's a scene where they assault Dracula's castle where I think they play Bloody Tears.
Yeah,
and like I may have gotten a little verklempt as that song kicked in. Yeah. So
what sucked though is that's the first time you heard something that was actually from the game. The rest of the music was like, most of it was just like, just generic, dark ambience, drone stuff. I don't even remember, but like they have so much source material to pull from, so many scores, so many songs. Like why just Bloody Tears? Like
I own the albums. I own several of the albums on vinyl. Like that's how much I like that music, and I'm baffled that they don't use more of it.
The background music for this podcast, a lot of it is video game music. Some of it is Castlevania. That's one way I show my influence there. But yeah, in the series, I do like that it had, I guess we say, Easter eggs, and did show like some of the monsters that they took out, especially in the second season. It did look like the I don't know what you call them. I know you fight them in pairs. The dude with the spear, and the guy that flies.
Yep. And the demon, the flying demon as well.
The flying demon.
Yeah, those guys are in Castlevania 4, and they're also in like Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, the first boss of Symphony of the Night too. They become like a regular enemy. Yeah, it's cool. But I do kind of agree that it did seem kind of edgy for the sake of edgy, just because the first time I heard the word fuck in that series was like, if I've heard the word fuck when I played the game, it wouldn't have been like, what?
Right.
But it was like, oh.
Right.
Oh, okay. That's cool, I guess. All right. So there's going to be a third season?
I think so. I think they said they're going to do it. And I heard, I might have heard it on a podcast or something, but I think they're going to keep making it because they're basically starting with not quite the beginning, but Castlevania 3 is the prologue, right? It's the prequel.
Yeah.
So they're starting there. They're probably going to move on to Simon, and he's got, 2 games, right? The first one and then Simon's Quest. And then from there you can move into Richter, and then you could move into Alucard with Symphony of the Night. I mean, that's 4 more seasons right there. So
a lot of material.
So are the rumors true that the producers have approached you about writing the new series?
It is not true. But if anyone's listening,
I'm trying to put that rumor
cheap.
out there. Maybe we can get it started.
Yeah. No, I'm here. Believe me. I work for cheap.
Oh,
don't say that.
Listen, just give me.
He's quality work.
George Lucas. Just give me the action figure rights, and we're all set.
I don't know if they'll make that mistake again.
Yeah.
Oh shit! But I don't know if Konami's making the decisions and they're owned by the Yakuza. Which, by the way, why do you think they're owned by the Yakuza?
I don't mean to disrespect any international crime syndicates out there. If any of them are listening,
we gotta say that.
I'm a family man with no influence. Right. We talked a little bit about this beforehand, but since I don't know, the early 2000s, Konami has just been making a series of like really boneheaded, bizarre decisions about their properties. This is the house that owns Silent Hill, right? Castlevania, right? Like these amazing Contra, right? Amazing franchises that were literally, this was like if not one of the top 3 developers in the world for 20 years, right? Arcade games, console games. And then they just sort of ran their franchises into the ground. They made a bunch of missteps. They didn't really successfully make the transition into 3D consoles, I think, very well for the most part. And then, Silent Hill aside, and then for whatever reason, they refocused their production, rather than making good quality video games with their established IP. They start producing pachinko machines and slot machines. And I don't even know if they make games anymore. I think they might do a soccer sim or something, because that's still profitable, a FIFA game or something. But they don't really make new games outside of like mobile games and pachinko machines anymore, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, I heard there was going to be a Castlevania mobile game, and I have not looked into it. I just heard about that. I was like, I don't even want to look.
Yeah, I think that just came out, or it's about to come out. But I can't really play games on my mobile phone unless it's like turn-based or it's something really simple like Pac-Man or something, right? A complicated, like pixel-perfect platformer like Castlevania, I don't see how that's going to work on my phone.
It's not even that. I think it's... of course, I haven't played it. I only heard about it. I don't know. It just seems cheap to me, though. Oh, now it's a mobile game. And not even like the same sort of like Game Boy Advance mobile games, because those are good. But this is, from what I understand, it makes it easier for you to, I guess, navigate or control it on your phone, on your touch screen and stuff. So, okay.
Yeah, I guess. But my suspicion is this is a free-to-play game.
Yeah.
Or something,
I believe it is.
Free in heavy quotes, like, oh, I see you died again. Would you like some power-ups? It's only $1,
Like a Candy Crush sort of thing.
Right.
God, man.
There's a good chance if you went back in time and looked at that point where things really changed with that company, you would see that there was some kind of significant personnel change going on at that period, maybe more than one person. But sometimes all it takes is just changing one really capable, talented person, leaving the company to fuck everything.
Well, I think the most famous example of that is Hideo Kojima. He was working on a new Silent Hill game with Norman Reedus and Guillermo del Toro. And they put out that demo PT, which is now like this sort of like lost, haunted game that only exists on PlayStation 4s that are disconnected from the internet. Because if you connect to the internet, it'll like delete it or whatever. Like,
wow.
So he was working on a brand new Silent Hill game, and basically they ran him out of the company. So he had to go out and form his own studio and stuff. So the latest Metal Gear Solid game that they made after he left was like a Metal Gear Survive, I guess, was a complete disaster. Like everybody hates it, and it's just like a confusing mess. So
Mm-hmm.
there might be some truth to that. You kick out enough of your like auteurs and your good producers and the folks with passion because you just want to make mobile games because it makes more money. Like everything's gonna fall apart.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's there's this misunderstanding about tech people and creative people that you can make up for one great mind with 1,000 mediocre minds, and you just can't. You can't. There is no substitution for a great mind in whatever your business is.
I think we've all had jobs at some point or another where you have a person or a team of people and they're hard workers or they're passionate, they know what they're doing, but you get kicked around by management enough, you're gonna want to move on and do something else.
Absolutely, and I've seen cases where the really capable people, they will get tired of that shit, and then they bring in people who are less capable, and funny how things just go to hell.
Mm-hmm. It
happens every fucking time.
And with Konami, they actually had people leave, and they're doing their own stuff, kind of, sort of. What's the dude's name? The Castlevania guy. He did Bloodstained. Koji Igarashi, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, hey, if you like Castlevania, Bloodstained is pretty damn good. It's pretty much the same thing. In fact, it is like the exact same thing. Music, gameplay, but it's fun. It's great.
There's two versions. There's one that's kind of like a Nintendo style game.
Mm-hmm.
Ritual of the Moon, I think, or something like that, or
Curse of the Moon, I believe.
Curse of the Moon, yeah. And then the other one, which is more the more contemporary, like Symphony of the Night type of game. They're both terrific. So if you like Castlevania, if you like horror, like they're both great.
Yeah, like that's a game where I picked it up and I had to beat it, and I had to play it all the way through. But if I was younger,
we don't want to hear about what you did with your door closed.
Yeah, I had to beat it. I was beating it, guys, vigorously. No, but that's also a game where I could easily sink more time into it. It's just I don't have the time, That's what I tell myself. But yeah, because all the
I'm the same way. I got to the bad ending for the newer one,
mm-hmm.
and I'm like okay, like I just put 10 hours into it. I'm like, now I'm gonna find the good ending, and I'm like looking up walkthroughs, and you got to find this secret ability, and you got to farm this enemy till you get this, and I just kind of was like,
oh, that was a bitch.
God.
That was a bitch. I will have to say,
I don't know if I'm gonna do this.
I live streamed it. I live streamed that game, my whole progress, and it was embarrassing because I got my ass kicked by so many bosses. I was like, man, this boss. I gotta get the pattern down right and not rush it. Oh, and then the last boss, Bell. Fuck that. But eventually I got it. Like,
yeah, being a dad now, especially with a baby, and I'm hoping you're gonna tell me it gets better. But like,
it does get better. It does.
I'm a guy who used to play I used to be able to beat Contra without the cheat code, right? Beat Castlevania, like Dark Souls, beat all those games, and now I'm like, can I just play a walking simulator? Because I got 20 minutes and I can't keep dying against this boss.
Good news.
You know what I mean?
Death Standing, I hear, is a walking simulator. And that's also by
check that out.
What's the dude's name? The guy who made
Kima?
Yeah, Silent Hill. Yeah, another Konami guy.
You may find that solitaire is your go-to game.
As long as it's got a quick save, I can play it.
Yeah.
Oh. But yeah, people are defecting, people are leaving, and they're doing their own projects, and Konami is milking it with these gambling machines. You told me at the beginning of the show that there's an erotica version, like Castlevania erotica something. I was like, come on now. But you weren't joking. It's legit.
I wish I was kidding. I wish I was exaggerating.
Man, that's sad. That's sad. Hey, do you...
Well, I mean...
Oh, go ahead.
Porn games, right?
Oh, yeah, porn games are fun.
There are porn games, right?
There are porn games. They're fun, but it's kind of weird to see a beloved franchise that used to be a powerhouse go down to that level, you know?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's kind of like the girlfriend you knew in high school, you know? She was your girlfriend, you know, SK? Like we talked about that in the pre-show. I can't give out everything we said in the green room. That one you got to listen to, guys. Hey, but do you, Jonathan, I can't speak right now. Do you have a paranormal experience?
Can I answer that question after I grab a beer?
Sure.
Or is that too much for your listeners?
No, go grab a beer.
Okay, wonderful. Great. I'll be right back.
I took a break to grab a beer myself, so I didn't bring one for Jonathan.
Finished off the rum chata tonight.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, that stuff's good. That's like drinking candy.
Oh, rum chata? Oh, shit. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It's
the Total Wine finally has a large bottle. Thank God.
That stuff is great. My wife likes that stuff too.
I'm back. Paranormal experience?
Yeah. Ghost story.
So my sister and my mom have both, and I'm not kidding. Like they both have like see ghosts.
Okay.
And that type of thing. My mom grew up in a haunted house. All of her brother and her sisters will all sort of swear to it. I've always been interested in aliens and ghosts and all that stuff, you know, checking those books out of the library when I was a kid over and over again. I can't say that I have as much as I want to believe. The closest I've come is I used to suffer from night terrors when I was a teenager through sort of probably my mid-20s or so. And there was a period of time where I would be sort of terrorized. I'd wake up, and if you're not familiar with night terrors, you wake up, you're paralyzed, more or less, but you can still sort of look around, and you're sort of half dreaming. So I would see like monsters or aliens or whatever coming to get me. And there was definitely like recurring shadow people. People talk about the Hat Man as a common one. There's a really good movie called...
We've done a show about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like I've seen him, although mine was, I got a distinctly feminine energy from that one. I'm not sure what that means. I might have been, I might have been playing too much Bloodborne, because there's a character in there who's like Eileen the Crow, I think. And I think I was like, are you from Bloodborne? Anyway, so I definitely saw the Hat Man or Hat Woman, shadow people for sure. Like, you know, coming at you, that type of thing. There's a documentary called The Nightmare, which is pretty good. It's very scary. It's definitely played up a little bit, but that does give you a pretty good idea of what it's like to have night terrors, especially if they're the more extreme variety. I will say, whenever I encountered like a gargoyle or a shadow person, you know, typically fighting back or, you know, angry energy, or often like prayer, that type of thing, would usually cease it and stop it like immediately.
Okay.
I don't know if is that supernatural? I don't know. It's probably just my weird brain chemistry. But that's the closest I've ever come. Sorry to disappoint you guys.
Well, you said gargoyle. Wait, what? You saw a gargoyle?
Yeah, so like I remember being in my college apartment, I think like junior year, and I opened my eyes and looked to, I think, the right of my bed. There was like this dog-faced demon stone statue sitting right next to me, like looking right at me. And I saw it just as vividly as if I was, you know, looking at a gargoyle on a church, you know, that type of thing. It scared the crap out of me.
Oh,
that is pretty scary.
Did it run away?
No, like I said, I was afraid at first, but then I got angry and was like trying to like mentally push it away. And then it just sort of faded out and disappeared. So,
that would freak
but
me
you
out.
can,
I think I'll shit my pants.
You can discount all this because I was a drug user at one point, so you can throw all this stuff out.
Well,
you know,
I mean, I have college days too, man. You know, it happens. We actually have a caption contest tonight, and it's a pretty good one. It's a pretty good one. I'm gonna throw the image on the screen. Let's see, throw it here. If I can find it. Jeez, I'm so unorganized here on my screen.
Is this on the YouTube stream? so I can see it.
I'll throw it up right about now. All right. So this image was on the Dead Man's Tome fan club on Facebook. You can join the group, be part of it. SK, do you have access to it? I can read it.
Fan club?
Yeah, the fan club. I can read them. That's fine. Here, yeah, I'll read them, and y'all let me know if y'all think it's a good one or not. Okay. So here we go. So we have Goldilocks and the two bears. This was sent to me, by the way. I'll keep that person anonymous.
So I can't share this broadcast with my wife. Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Oh no!
What? There's security dots on there. You could have made those googly eyes.
Could have. That would have been funnier. Goldilocks and the two bears. The first one's too small. Second one's too big. Third one's all right. Is that? Let's see. The first comment, just right. Look at that. Second comment. They weren't kidding when they said you could die of exposure in the woods. All right. Next one. A lot of black covering the bears. Wonder why they're censored. All right. Let's see. Next one. Who said bears and cougars don't get along?
Oh.
I don't know. She doesn't look like a cougar. I could be mistaken. Let's see. Bare breasts. All right. Okay, let's just play words there. Babs feared her first camping trip would prove a drag without her boyfriend until she met the twins. Okay. Yeah.
Which one's Babs, though?
I know, right? I'm kind of. Which, by the way, what if the bear behind her is Mama Bear? Okay. Let's see the next one. Let's see. Goldilocks is about to get eaten by bears in a fun way. Okay. Don't feed the bears, but that one's spelled as in bare breasts. Okay. So the next one. I like my nipples chewed extra. Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's see. I don't own this line, but bear fucker, do you need assistance?
That's from Super Troopers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I forgot about that. Good one.
Oh, that movie has good lines. Let's see. Toys for tits. The park rangers only hope the bears leave something for them to play with later. Again and again. All right.
All right. I think the Super Trooper line is definite winner on that one, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. All right. So that was the caption contest. That was good, guys. That was good. I'll try to keep that going every week, you know? During the October Blitz, couldn't do it. Are you not going to host the contest every single day? Man, we're doing too much.
Eddie has a quick question.
Yeah?
What's the scariest game?
Ooh, that's a good question. Hey, Jonathan, what's the scariest game?
Let me think. When I played Silent Hill 1 for the first time, it scared the crap out of me, but that was like a year after it come out. I don't think it holds up as very scary anymore. But Silent Hill games are pretty creepy.
You played the second one?
Say again?
Have you played the second one?
Yeah, that one's really good too. It's definitely creepy. I don't know. Most games don't scare me. I mean, you got the like jump scare simulators, you know, like
that's more like startling versus scary.
Yeah. So that stuff isn't really my bag. I can't really recall the last time a game really creeped me out. Unfortunately, I'd love to find one.
Yeah,
the Blair Witch game looks pretty creepy.
The Sims, how about that? That's pretty scary.
Oh, The Sims is like a torture simulator.
Look, pick out tile for your house.
I didn't do any of that. I put him in the pool and take out the ladder and watch him die. I'd barricade the door And watch them urinate on themselves. This is horrible. It's a torture simulator. Jesus. Oh, and
did you guys play? Did you guys play Resident Evil 7?
Dead.
Oh, what were you saying?
Did you play Resident Evil 7?
No.
Either of you?
No.
That one was. As I'm thinking through, I played that a year ago. I think that really freaked me out. That was intense. I had to like take breaks from it because it was like you're basically being stalked by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family. Like that's through most of the game. It's extremely intense. I'd recommend that one.
Okay.
As I think, yeah.
Oh, what's your favorite horror movie?
It's either In the Mouth of Madness.
Oh, that's a good
Night of the Living Dead, or House on Haunted Hill, the original.
Oh, the original.
Depending on my mood.
Oh, yeah. Black and white. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's Vincent Price's best role, man. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I played that too on this channel because public domain and all that. I used to play public domain movies on this. I mean, would stream them throughout the night, but you would think public domain would be okay on YouTube. Even that's kind of wishy-washy. I hope
they bounce that, really?
Well, over little things. While the movie is public domain, they might hit you. Like technically, Night of the Living Dead is, but its status kind of wishy-washy too. It is public domain, but I guess when the sounds they use is licensed by someone else. I don't know how. Maybe they just claim it. I don't know. But with YouTube, it's like anyone can claim anything, and it's a fight. It's like fuck it. I'm not doing that anymore. Yeah. I already run risk with this channel. Just what we talk about on this show. So, right. And I'm okay with that. Oh man, but yeah, good movies, man. In the Mouth of Madness. Not too many people.
Yeah, it's that. Like my favorite, like H.P. Lovecraft. It's not really an adaptation, but it's also the most accurate adaptation, you know, of his work. So
I mean, look what they did with Reanimator. I mean, they tried. I mean,
you know, drop all the racist stuff. That's step one, and then you know, you're left with about 20%, and then no, I like Reanimator quite a bit. I actually like the story too. Like, I think if you listen to Stuart Gordon talking about that movie, you know, he was like, well, we kind of had to do something different to make it a marketable movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I love Reanimator and I love From Beyond. I actually like From Beyond better.
All right. Well, Jonathan Raab, man, this has been great having you on the show. I hope you enjoyed it. You had a good time?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And that's what it is, man. A chill, relaxed experience, man. We just talk about you, what you do, and kind of talk about the things that come up. Guys, ladies, you made it this far. Press the like button, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps out a whole lot. Y'all take it easy.
Night.